Hi guys, how you doing? Well, I'm doing okay, and it's time for me to continue the story of my dad, Bob Liftin, and Regent Sound Studios. Now, as I've told you many times, I watch my own videos, and see if there was anything that I missed, anything that needs to be respoken, that I might not have been 100% accurate. And then I thought about it and says, you know what? I got to correct that. Now, I've been kind of going back and forth between 25 West 56th Street and 1619 Broadway. And I also believe that there was some information that I left out. So, in talking about Dad and Regent Sound, I wanted to cover as much information about 25 West 56th Street site as I can. Okay, now, we had, back in 25 West 56th Street, we had a librarian, I think he was a librarian by the name of Jim. And he was a very tall guy. I think he was like 6'4" or something. Very lean, very lean. He could play basketball, I'm sure. Very nice guy. I don't know if he was an engineer or he was a librarian. But I do remember Jim, and he was a really great guy. And now, the story about Brandy, You're a Fine Girl. The part of the story that I inadvertently left out was that when my dad was working on that song, it was a marathon session going non-stop. Okay, this is how dedicated my dad was in producing that song. Okay, and why he put so much importance, I guess is the word I'm thinking of, to that song. I think because his reputation was at stake, his viewpoint was at stake, because here he was really putting himself out there. He was a force. He was a force to be reckoned with. And if he believed in his heart, in his soul, in his gut, in his mind, that the way he saw that song to be arranged and performed, he was going to fight for it. And he was going to fight for it tooth and nail. And that's how dedicated he was at his craft and his expertise and what he did. But the part I left out from the last video was that he worked a marathon session, almost 24, 25 hours straight. I think maybe even 27 hours straight. That he worked on Brandy, You're a Fine Girl. And he worked and he worked and he worked non-stop until it sounded right. And the song is still holding up to this very day. And I'm pretty proud of my dad for that. And he was incredible. And that's so he has label credit. Now, the site on 25 West 56th Street. Okay, there were two elevators. There was a regular elevator and there was a freight elevator. And the freight elevator, when you entered the building, the passenger elevator was directly in line with the front door. And the freight elevator, I don't know why this was, you had a corridor, and then the freight elevator was on the side. So basically, the passenger elevator had basically two doors. One that faced the street, the other that faced the same direction as the freight elevator. Now, if you get out of the freight elevator, when the doors open, you are looking straight at the hallway and directly in line with Carol's office, which was the head office. And there was a Carol who worked the front desk. Now, next to that door, it was a glass door that had the original font, Regent Sound Studios, on it. And directly next to that door is a door to the library. And next to that door was a door to Joel Doran's office. Now, Joel Doran, I believe, was an engineer. I do not remember if Joel Doran worked for Dad or worked independently, but used Dad's studio to produce his records. Okay. And the name of his company was called The Masked Announcer. Okay. Then to the right was a door that led to the Duke Room, the closet, which had the punch clock, Dad's office, and Bess's office, B-E-S-S, Bess's office. Now, Bess was the accountant. And every time that I would visit the studio so that I can do my records, I'd bring my tapes in and I laid discs of them, that whenever it was time for lunch, I would go into Bess's office and say, Bess, I'm ready to have lunch. And then she would call the deli that is directly across the street, okay, directly opposite the entrance. And she would order for me my usual, which was a burger, fries, milk, and a chocolate layer cake. And let me tell you something, they made the best burgers, the best fries, and oh my God, the best seven-layer chocolate layer cake. It was delicious. So, I never got fat though. Never got fat. This only happened after I was college. Okay. Now, when my dad changed over to doing music for television or music for videos, he was experimenting with, now this is back in 1975 now. He saw change in music back in 1975. And 1975 was a very pivotal year. Okay. Pivotal year in many respects. Rod Serling passed away in 1975. Larry and Moe of the Three Stooges, I believe, also died in 1975. And Saturday Night Live debuted in 1975. And my father's switch over from recording record albums to music for video was also in 1975. And 5 happens to be my all-time favorite number, So 1975, to me, was almost like my favorite year in the whole decade. But, one of the artists who recorded at Regent Sound Studios in the 1970s was Carly Simon's sister, Lucy Simon. And she recorded an album. And on that album, there were 2 songs that I became acquainted with. One was her cover of the Everly Brothers song, Dream, 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 All You Have to Do Is Dream. And the other was Sometimes I Think of Him, or something like that, sometimes. Okay. And on the first song, Dad experimented with a music video. So back in 1975, my dad thought that the future of music would be music videos. That was my dad's idea. This was about 6 years before MTV exploded on America. Okay. This was 1975. And what Dad did was he set up a closed circuit camera and have it face Lucy Simon as she sat in a chair. And my dad would plug in the multi-track or the stereo mix that was most likely either on a half-inch or a quarter-inch tape. I would say a half-inch. I would say a half-inch. If it was going to sound the best it could be, my guess is it would be a half-inch tape. I don't know, maybe a half-inch tape would be quad stereo. Yeah, I think it would be quad stereo. So if you ever get a four speaker stereo quad, that was usually the mix was done on a half-inch tape. Stereo was usually done at quarter-inch at full speed. So I guess it has the best output, and it would be they would use the best quality tapes. Now, Dad used Ampex, and there were 3 types of Ampex tapes that my dad used: 456, 406, and 407. Now, 406 was the type of tape that we always did. We always used that. I used that to make copies and so forth. That was 406. 407 tape was a lot thinner. And because it's a thinner tape, you hold more tape on the reel and it covers more. But the problem with that is because it's a thinner tape, there's a greater risk that the tape could jam in the mechanism and the tape could tear. So even though it gives you the benefit of more minutes, it's not advisable because it's a fragile tape. 456 Ampex tape. I think that's the one with the most solid output. Because it's a much thicker tape, and the base is thicker, and it will hold the information better, and it would be played back better, I think. We hardly use 456. I think we always use 406. So anyway, all right. So he had a mix of the song of Dream. All I gotta do is dream. And what he did was he plugged it into the video recorder where the close camera was, and she would lip sync to the song while the somebody's here collecting ice for the ice trays up there.
I'll be back like 2 more, maybe 3 times, okay?
Okay, that's fine.
Keep interrupting you.
Oh, that's okay. All right. It's a lot of fun here. Anyway, so, excuse me. So she would lip sync, Lucy Simon would lip sync. And I made a copy on VHS. I brought my VHS recorder. This was years later, of course. And I would make my own copy on the VHS because there was no way in on God's green earth that I could be able to have a reel-to-reel videotape, okay, because this was back in the 70s now, and they didn't have video cassettes back then, even though VHS started around 1975, but really didn't hit the market until 1979. But it was a 1-inch videotape, and the machine was a dinosaur machine that weighed a ton, and it had to sit on a mobile cart, okay? So it was unrealistic to have these, videotapes and the player, in the house. So I brought my VHS player in and made copies. But he was the first one to think of it.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, okay. He was the first one who thought of it. And then they had a camera positioned on the floor of Studio A, while the backup singers, who are supposed to be a well-known R&B group, I never found out who they were, doing the backup to her song. Every now I think of him sometime, and it got me into it. So anyway, so he was a pioneer. So I don't know how it came about, but it was in 1975 that my dad started working at NBC Saturday Night Live. Okay. And the first year that Saturday Night Live was on ABC, hosted by Howard Cosell. And he was there for that. I don't remember what happened with Saturday Night Live with Howard Cosell on ABC. But when NBC took over the title, my dad, of course, went with it. And he was the sound consultant for the show. And if you look at the season set DVDs of the first 5 years, if you look at the credit scroll at the end, okay, starting with the second season, you will see my dad's name, Bob Liftin, as sound consultant. And I would watch every Saturday night. It was a night I stayed up for, because we didn't have, tapes in those days to record it. There was no VCRs in that time to record it. No, nothing to program anything. So if I wanted to see it and see Dad's name, I stayed up and I watched it live. And as I would stay right through to the credits, and the show was just about over, and they were saying goodbye and good night, and the credits would start, I would say, come on, Dad, I know you're in there. Come on, Dad, you're in there somewhere. And then when I would see Dad's name, sound consultant Bob Liftin, I would say, there you are, Dad, there you are. Yes, that's my good old Dad. So his name was on the credit scroll. Now, working at NBC, he also had access to tickets. Okay. And he told both my sister and I, if any of us wanted tickets, all we had to do was ask, and my dad could get tickets. Now, NBC, or Saturday Night Live, did 2 shows. At about 7:30, there would be the dress rehearsal. At 11:30, of course, would be the live show. Now, they had the dress rehearsal for a very, very good reason. And the reason why they had the dress rehearsal was they wanted to test the skits on a live audience to see which skit had the most laughs and which skit had the fewest laughs, right? And they would look it over and they would decide, okay, this skit didn't go over very well. This skit didn't get a lot of laughs. So we will cut this skit from the live show. So they always had more material for a show for this reason. And I guess the writers were also very busy writing too. And so actually each show had its own benefit. Okay. If you watched the dress rehearsal, the benefit of watching the dress rehearsal is you would see skits that the rest of the country would never, ever see. It would be like the deleted scenes, right? It would also be like the director's cut of a movie, right? The director's cut was all his material that was not cut by the studio. Okay. So sometimes a DVD would be released saying this is the director's cut, which means every scene is in the movie. And then if a scene or two is deleted from the movie, it is offered as a special, special feature as a deleted scene. Okay. So that was the benefit of coming to a dress rehearsal, because you get to see material from your favorite writers and your favorite actors in skits that the whole country would never ever see. And you had a front row seat at seeing lost skits, like you have lost episodes, right? Now, of course, the live show had the benefit of being there live and the possibility that the camera would zoom in on you and have a little chyron on the bottom of the screen. And then you say, oh, I'm on live TV, I'm on live TV. Okay, so the dress rehearsal and the live show had each their own benefits. Okay, so one day my sister took advantage of that, and she would always ask my dad for tickets. And of course, my dad would get them for her. And if ever she met a guy and they were talking about what they're going to do for their first date, my sister would always say, let's go to Saturday Night Live. I can get tickets. We'll go to Saturday Night Live. And I think my sister was very popular with guys, during this time, because she always could impress them and have a memorable first date by taking her dates to Saturday Night Live for the live show. Now, one day, I don't know why my dad did this, but one day he brought me into NBC. And I got to see where Saturday Night Live was done. And let me tell you something, I never saw a smaller room. A smaller room. I said, this is Saturday Night Live. And I saw the Weekend Update set. Hell, I could have gone over there and had somebody film it. I'm on Weekend Update and you're not, But I didn't do that. I was overwhelmed. I said, oh my God. The first person my dad introduced me to was Don Pardo. Okay. Don Pardo was the first star, okay, the legendary NBC voiceover announcer, Don Pardo. And he was a very nice man. I enjoyed meeting him. He enjoyed meeting me too. Very nice man. And then the next person he introduced me to was, prepare yourself, John Belushi. John Belushi, I met John Belushi on the set of Saturday Night Live. Now, my dad said, John, this is my son Jimmy. Jimmy, this is John Belushi.
Sorry.
And so, it's okay. And he must have smoked, he must have did some drugs in his dressing room or something, because he was a little spacey. He didn't say anything, and when I shook his hand, he didn't have that strong a handshake that I remember. But I do remember vividly that his hand felt very clammy. It was a very clammy feel to his hand, but I'll never forget meeting John Belushi. And then sometime later, Jane Curtin came out of her dressing room with her hair all in curlers, and she was going over to the Weekend Update set to rehearse Weekend Update. And so my dad stops her on her way, and she says, Jane, excuse me for a second. I want you to meet my son, Jimmy. Jimmy, this is Jane Curtin. So I said, nice to meet you, Jane. And she said, nice to meet you too. And then she says, are you watching the show? I said, yes. She said, you better laugh. That's Jane Curtin. So I watched the show, the live show, the dress rehearsal in the audience. Now, Jill St. John was the host, and Eddie Money, not Eddie Murphy, Eddie Money was a musical artist. And it was at that show that I heard the two songs that was a hit, Baby Hold On. Yeah, I heard Baby Hold On for the very first time while I sat in the audience. And I think he also did 2 Tickets to Paradise. I think was the other one he did. But I'll never forget Baby Hold On. And as soon as I heard it, I would go to the record store and hoped that I would find Baby Hold On, and I would grab it. I said, oh, I love that song. Now, so of course for the live show, I would sit in the control room. But I sort of had to sit in a corner so I was out of everybody's way. Which was fine by me. And I didn't understand a thing that went on there. Not a thing. But between the dress rehearsal and the live show, we would go upstairs and there would be a table of cold sandwiches and chips and drinks and stuff like that. It's sort of like a nosh. And so I went to a table, took a plate. It was like a buffet. Took my plate, put food on it, grabbed silverware, drink, napkin. Went to my table and proceeded to eat. And I'm in the middle of eating, and I notice out of the corner of my eye somebody is standing right next to the table I'm eating at. And of course I'm all by myself. And so I look up to see who it was. Brace for it. It was Gilda Radner. Gilda Radner, the Gilda Radner, was standing right next to the table where I was eating. And I looked up at her and I was like, oh my God, it's Gilda Radner. It's Anna Karenina, whatever, all the other characters she did. And she says, is anybody sitting here? I said, no, please, sit down, join me. And we got to talking, and she was like the girl next door. She was just the kid next door. She was down to earth, she was funny, and I think some of my humor I rubbed off on me. In other words, some of her humor rubbed off on me. She made me laugh. She was a joy to speak to. And then came the live show, and then it was over, and then Dad drove us home. But on the way home, Dad was speaking to a man called Pete Fatovich. And I never forgot that name because the first syllable of his last name was Fat. Okay. So I never forgot Pete Fatovich. But I forget the job he did at NBC. Now, if I'd have known that I was going to be collecting, I'd be watching NBC shows, like old NBC shows, like Howdy Doody and Colgate Comedy Hour, okay, I probably would have asked Dad if he can get me kinescopes of those shows. And it was very or Concentration, and probably my dad could probably get him, and I would have this huge collection of NBC shows. But I'll tell you what, my dad did bring home from NBC. This was during, I think, one of the seasons that NBC changed their logo to the red and blue N, And so the show would start with a slide of some made-up title, like Starsky and Hutch's car breaks down. Okay. And then the show would start with a slide that showed it, and Don Parter would say, Starsky and Hutch's car breaks down, will not be seen tonight because of this important message, or something like that. So these were on 35 millimeter slides, and every week my dad would bring them home to me, because once they were used and aired, they were never used again. There was no need to, So I ended up with a collection of all these 35 millimeter slides of these Saturday Night Live NBC cards or slides, that were used only once. So I had a big collection of them, but now they're all gone, So that was Dad's job at Saturday Night Live. So now we mush on to the 1980s, as I said, and so MTV, we're now in the early 80s. MTV is our second biggest client. Elliot Lawrence was our major client, and so I would be in the dupe room to do the broadcast cards. I would cut 3 inches of 1K tone and to the beginning of each cue, so that it would be a signal for the cart machine to stop and be all queued up. I also did copies for Macy's radio spots with Dan Ingram. Dan Ingram would come. I met him once. He was working in Studio C, and Studio C was a much smaller studio, and it was in Studio C that there was a lot of voiceovers for Clinique. Clinique and Macy's were the two. So I would get a couple of Clinique commercials, radio commercials, and a couple of Macy's commercials. And it was my job as duplicating engineer to put virgin tape on all 3 slave machines. There were 4 reel-to-reel Ampex tape machines. The major one, the first one, was the master. The other 3 were slaves. I put virgin tape on each of those machines, and I would hit record on all 3 machines, hit play on the master, and then I would they had the mixer was a patch bay of cables, and I would distribute the output of the master player into a distributor bay, and then the output would go into the inputs of the 3 slaves. Okay, and so I would be able to make 3 copies in one pass. So if let's say Macy's wanted, let's say 33 copies, which would go to 33 different radio stations, then I would do 11 passes. And then as soon as I did that work, I would go to each reel, I would rewind it on a little 7-inch reel, tape it down, put it in the box, computer would print up a label for the box, I'd get them all ready, put it in a bag with a delivery slip on them, saying what they are, who it goes to, and I set it out at the front desk for delivery to take it to Macy's. Because the Macy's would then distribute the tapes to the various radio stations. Okay. So it was, so my job was pretty varied. And then in 1984, the greatest thing to happen to me happened to me. MTV was on the air for a couple of years now. And the people over at MTV were thinking about launching a sister channel, video channel, for older folks. People in their 20s and 30s. So there would be videos by Kenny Rogers, Barbra Streisand, Barry Manilow, these artists, right? And they were going to call it VH1, Video Hits 1. And they named it that because they thought that if VH1 would be as successful as the MTV was, then they would launch VH2. Okay, which they're kind of doing now with classic MTV, classic VH1, and classic soul or R&B or whatever, So, but back in '84, they were going to launch VH1, and if VH1 was successful, they would launch VH2. And so, now, when MTV approached my dad about this, they told my dad that they were planning on launching VH1 the following year, 1985, but they didn't have space to film the Veejay segments. And they asked my dad if he had any ideas. And so my dad, being the smart businessman that he was, and based on the fact that MTV was our second biggest client, My dad said to MTV, you know what? We have 2 closets we're not using. We can convert these 2 closets to a studio and a control room, and we can produce your VJ segments for your channel. They said, Bob, that's a great idea. Let's go ahead. So construction began on the 2 closets, and one closet was going to be the studio, and the other closet was going to be the control room. And my dad picked me. Yes, yours truly, to be the video recording engineer. So for the first time, I had an opportunity to advance my career in recording. Okay? In the field of video and recording, right? To be the video recording engineer for MTV's new channel, VH1. Okay? And they had personalities and one guest star as BJs. So we had John Bowser Bauman, shot on up. We had Frankie Crocker, who I think was a radio personality in New York, R&B and soul and disco and everything. And we had Scott Shannon, who was a radio personality at the Z Morning Zoo, Z100 in New York. And it topped it all off with the very own Don Imus of Imus in the Morning. Okay? So I got to meet all of them. I got to work with all of them. John Bowser Bauman, he was a sweet guy. He was a great guy. And we almost became friends. And everybody else was kind of, Frankie Crocker was kind of low-key. And Scott Shannon was very, yeah, you know, he was very alive and animated. And then, of course, we had Don Imus, who just had a presence about him. Every time he came in and I was like standing face to face with him, I was like, humming. This is the Don Imus. The Don Imus. And he just had this awesome presence about him. And I was like, yes, Don, yes, Mr. Imus. Is everything okay, Mr. Imus? You know. I mean, that's the way I felt, working with him. But I always praised him. And at the end of every shoot, we would do 1 shift per half-hour recording. And at the end of each show, and he would come out to change his wardrobe for the next shoot, I would say, great show, Don, great show. That was funny. That was great. I loved it. And I would tell him that after each one. And then twice, on 2 separate occasions, Don Imus would refer to me by name in a segment. Twice. And I was so flattered. I was floored. This is the Don Imus calling me by name. Wow. And so I would note it and I would say, what segment is that? What day does it air? What segment is it? And I would be there at home with my VCR and I would tape it. And I was like, yeah, that's the take. Come on, Don, say my name. We got Fat Jimmy Liftin in the back. Because that's what he called it. He would say, who we got? We got, Patty behind me. And Fat Jim is in the other room. So he referred to me by name. And then after he called me Fat Jim, he said, he probably hates me now, huh? That was Don Imus. And when he came out, I said, Don, I don't hate you. I don't hate you, Don. I love you, Don. That was incredible. That was absolutely incredible. You, Don, I'm so glad. No, I don't hate you. I don't hate you for calling me fat. Not at all, Don. You know, I'm famous on TVB, Don Imus preferred to be my name, Jim Liftin. Oh my God. You know, so it was a job I loved. And not because of that. Not because of that. Because here was something that I have done all my life. Because I had an audio tape recorder. And I was just, I think, getting my own VHS player recorder. And I was always doing recordings. And I knew how to set the clock and program it to record on this channel at this time. I mean, this is stuff I knew. This is stuff I understood. And you hit the record and play. And then you hit the rewind. Then you hit stop. You hit pause. I mean, I've done this all my life. And here I am, able to do this on a grander scale. And it was so much fun. It was so much fun setting up the cameras, lighting the cameras, turning on all the equipment, getting all the tapes ready, and then just be there. I had my headphones on where I'd be listening to the girl in the other room, and she would slate the spots. I says, okay, this is take or slate 702. And then I would hit record. I would wait for the light to come on. That did tracking. And I was told to wait 5 seconds. So I'd count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'd say, speed. We got speed. And then she would clock, you know, and then I would hear either, okay, that's a take. Of course, I would keep recording. I wouldn't stop, you know. And every time she'd slate it, I would hit the memory button. I'd hit the memory button. So in case we had to burn back and say, okay, we got to do that take over.
Yeah.
We need to get some ice.
Sorry about that. Well, I think I got to stop anyway. But anyhow, I will continue this because I'm getting kind of hot and the light is beating down on my head. So anyway, I will finish this and I will, finish my story anyway. So, I forgot what I was saying. So anyway, I knew how to record and everything, and so it was a lot of fun. I was turning the equipment on, and then I would, you know, record the segments. I would rewind the tapes, put them in the box, you know, and then I would, I think, label. Would I be labeling them? No, I think they do. And they would label the boxes, you know, when the show aired, what day it aired, what hour it aired, you know, or what hours the segments air, you know. And I just had a lot of fun. I had a blast. I loved that job. And I finally found my niche. I finally found my niche after leaving college, being disillusioned with cinematography and not sure where to go in my career. I was thrown into basically a carnival, basically an amusement park, roller coaster, roundup, all the fun rides you'd go on, the tilt-a-whirl, you know, roller coaster. It was a fun ride. It was a fun ride, and I loved it. So, we will stop here, because like I said, I'm getting hot with this light beating down on me. So we will stop here and continue with the next video. Now, I thought this would cover only 2 volumes, but there's going to be a 3rd volume, or a 3rd part. So, I will continue later. And thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and I will see you next time when I continue with part 3 of the story of my dad and Regent Sound Studios. So until next time, I'll see you later. Take care. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Okay. Bye.